So I've been incited by fellow command blocker Swix, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, to polish up a lot of my older systems with particles and sound effects. So truth be told, when I went ahead and made these systems, I didn't have the command block knowledge I do now. So I didn't incorporate sound effects or particles because I simply didn't know how to actually use the commands. That's not the case nowadays because, as you can see with a lot of my newer creations, I make full effect of particles and sound effects because I've gone ahead and learned how exactly to use the commands. The issue is, in order to add sound effects and particles to my older systems, is going to be a monstrous task, and the reason for that is the way in which command blocks actually operate. So if we compare impulse command blocks to chain and repeating command blocks, the sequence in which they operate is completely different. So an impulse command block runs off of a three-part sequence. First, it checks for a block update to see if the command block is powered. If it's not powered, it stops the sequence. If it is powered, it moves on to running the command. And the command sequence is split into two. So if you're using execute, you can set up a selector parameter, and what that does is add that step to the sequence. So first it checks if the block is updated, then it checks to make sure everything matches the selector, and then it runs a command. That's fine. If you're not powering the command block, it's essentially off and it's not running. The problem with repeating and chain command blocks is the sequence in which they operate is slightly different. They actually run the command before they check for a block update. This is an awful design, and I don't know why Mojang or Microsoft, I should say, implemented it this way, and they didn't keep it similar to, obviously, impulse commands, just with the higher tick rate in which they run. But what this does is, for instance, this command is execute if score at P. So the at P is the nearest player. What this means is this command block is checking every player, every tick, every second. So if there's 100 people in the world, it's going to check all 100 of them every tick for every second, so 20 times a second, to see if they match the selector requirement. If you change this to, for instance, all entities, we're now getting into astronomical numbers. On average, there's 130 entities around a player. I think that's the soft cap. So every tick, this is going to check 130 entities to see if they match the requirement. So it's processing the information of 130 entities 20 times a second. So 2,600 entities every second. You take a build on the scale as large as mine, I've got probably 1,000 plus command blocks. If they were all chain or repeating command blocks, it means the game would be processing almost 250,000 bits of data every second. That's not enough to crash the game, but it is enough to significantly lag it. And not in terms of FPS. FPS wouldn't be affected. So if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the FPS counter, 60 means there's no issue there. There's no frame rate drops. But on the right-hand side, we have TPS. And TPS is ticks per second. So the game operates in that cycle of 20 ticks. If that number were to decline, it will drop to 19 or 15. What that means is you hitting an entity, you being able to place a block, you being able to jump, all these things would be greatly affected. And as you can see, my build as it is already putting a lot of strain on that system. It's not dropping it below 20 ticks, which is where I've tried to keep it, but it is approaching the point of drastically affecting it. So what this means is I have to come up with an alternative way to actually implement particle effects and sound effects into these systems without a universal mechanism. So by universal mechanism, I mean a constantly running command block to check everything that's been met, and then to run the sound effect and the particle effect at an appropriate time. This would be the easiest way to implement it, because for instance, our block conversion here checks if there's a shulk block on it, and then converts it to whatever you name it. So for instance, cobblestone. So ideally, I'd want a command block to check when both a shulk and cobblestone are present. So the single tick where the shulk block isn't deleted and the cobblestone is spawned to run a sound effect. This is fine with repeating command blocks because it obviously checks every tick. If I change it to a timer system, I have to finally and manually tune the timer system so that it runs at the appropriate interval. This means I have to manually go back and look at every system and think about what is the optimal time for me to run the command. Oh, but you got to do what you got to do. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. And lastly, we have the updated combat effects, which I've barely started, so I've done 6 out of 30 of them. And these ones are going to take by far the longest. So for each particle effect I want to add, I have to use 10 command blocks per weapon. So you can see down there it says Storm 2, and I have Storm 1, 2, 3, Max, and PvP. So there's 5 varieties of each effect, meaning that I need 1 command block per variety, and then I need 1 command block for the main hand, 1 command block for the offhand. Ooh, so 10 per command block, then double it because we're doing particle effects and sound effects, so it's 20, and then times by 30. It's going to take a while. But here they are, at least 6 of them, 1 of each type. So, what do you think? I'm talking to you, Swix. So feedback is obviously very important, and I'm glad you did comment, because it's pushed me to incorporate all these different features that really help make the map shine just that little bit more. And of course, for the sake of lag control, I have made them all toggleable, so we've got extra particle effects and extra sound effects all down there, and you can just turn on and off between them being active. Whew, but boy was there a lot of work. So a big issue that I ran into is I've got a couple of different systems. So for instance, this command block here, they run off the same tick. So this chain over here fills in redstone on these columns, making each of these command blocks operate one after the other. It's in the positive X direction, I'm pretty sure, is what command blocks operate in. Positive Z, so positive X first, then Z, then Y is like the sequence of events in which they activate. Whereas in contrast, things like my equivalent exchange system here, because the redstone is filled in between, there's no delay. So in order to add a sound effect, I have to use a different mechanism to the columns. And then even worse, my systems in here are run in lines, so I've split them up so that they don't all run at once. And yeah, so not only did I have to think up different ways to incorporate the commands without obviously just checking every entity, I had to then work off of whatever I have, 10, maybe 15 different timer sequences. But the worst of it's almost over. The only thing left is, of course, to finish off the weapon effects. Ooh, it's probably a few days' work too. This alone took almost the whole day. But I'll get there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy. See ya, and give feedback. Oh, shit. Feedback's very important. See ya.